These industries are going through such a disruption. The contractors, particularly the older ones, are saying, hey, you never had this information before.
Misconception is the contractors are forced to be union. They're not. They chose to be union for a reason.
Go out there and find a Revit course that's 180 hours. It's not going to be free. Our members, we give them the education that's necessary to ensure our future in this industry.
These are the true stories
of the shared pains
facing designers,
builders,
inspectors,
and operators
on our quest to
streamline collaboration
in the digital age.
Find out what happens
when industry and technology
stop playing nice
and start getting real.
We are the Construction Progress
Coalition.
And this is the Shared Pains Podcast.
Welcome to the Construction Shared Pains Podcast. My name is Sasha Reed, and as your host, it is my role to help all of us gain new perspective on the systemic changes necessary for design and construction to thrive in the digital age. In part 2 of our 3-part series on the investment in innovation, we shift our focus from walking the talk to measuring the walk. So Dan, as Director of Process and Innovation for Walsh Group, how are you measuring your investments in innovation?
I'm trying to put together a survey a very open source survey. What are your innovation metrics or technology metrics that you're tracking? Because I have a theory that nobody really has tried and true methodologies. So why not kind of open source this? Why not track all this stuff, understand what people are doing, find the best of the best and share them? Because I can't tell you how many articles I've read that all it says is metrics are good. You should have metrics. Go make metrics.
Okay, Nathan, who is representing our guest perspectives today?
Sasha, to help us understand how measurement impacts innovation, we're bringing together 2 panel conversations, starting with the MCAA Technology Conference, where I sat down with...
Okay, my name's Ken Schneider. I'm a training specialist for the United Association International Training Fund. I'm out of St. Louis, Local 268.
Ken is a master relationship builder. Thanks to partnerships he has developed with leading contact solutions, UA members have free access to...
180 hours of Revit is our Revit program. We teach Bluebeam, we teach Microsoft Office, we teach Primavera P6, drone certification courses, robotic total station courses. That would be Mike Zivanovic out of Local 597 Chicago. I'm the technology manager for our local. My primary responsibility back home is implementing technology within our current curriculum.
The UA represents multiple trades, while Ken comes from
fire protection. So I'm a sprinkler fitter by trade, still am a sprinkler fitter by trade.
Mike represents
straight line pipe fitting local, so I'm a pipe fitter by trade.
And here to represent the plumber's perspective is Stephan Schnell.
So my background, like you said, is plumbing. I'm at a Local 467 in San Mateo County, California. Spent 7 years in the field, transitioned to design work, BIM, VDC work. Recently became full-time technology supervisor for our apprenticeship program.
We're excited to continue our collaboration with the UA and other trade unions to define the future of performance measurement in construction.
Our second panel conversation comes from day 2 inside the CDX hub at AEC Next, where we brought together a hacker.
Damon Hernandez. Like spending my weekends with people from the built environment professions, hacking around. So.
A marketing director.
Kalyn, Lengieza. I am with StructionSite, the director of marketing.
And an insurance salesman.
Dixon, Wright, and I am in the surety business with USI Insurance Services.
To talk about the disruption of performance measurement in the digital age.
We provide surety bonds to the construction community. And as a consumer of data, the work that CDX is doing is vital to our efficiency.
People are using web through things like StructionSite or others. How do we leverage a lot of what the browser is able to do now with like biometrics for authentication and payments if that's necessary? Very passionate about how we can use technologies in the right way to help missions like what we're trying to do here.
Very excited to be a part of the CDX and get all the information about shared pains, digital twin.
Lengieza, where have I heard Lengieza
you know what?
Before?
No, I'm the only
familiar.
one. I am the only Lengieza.
No association with Chris Lengieza whatsoever.
None. That guy.
CPC wishes to thank StructionSite, Surety Resource Connection, and AEC Hackathon for supporting our mission to drive open data interoperability across the project delivery lifecycle. Help us improve digital literacy in design and construction by joining our growing list of technology and AEC supporters. Head to constructionprogress.org/membership to learn more. Let's be honest, this process is not simple. Nonetheless, we're going to digest, debate, decide, and deliver people and process transformation through integrated technology. First, we'll digest how measurement impacts behavior before we debate the role of contract incentives to reframe what matters when it comes to performance measurement. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide the changes in measurement and culture that will drive success. This is something that I think is fascinating and telling, but I want to hear from you. How does measurement impact behavior?
I think that's what's so interesting about this age of the ability for technology, whether it's IoT or other reality capture and ways of capturing what got done, and how great that can be. But also, again, back to that fear of transparency and tracking and Big Brother and what are you going to do with that data?
So that's what's fun, right? Is to really look at what's happening with the advancements of the web, and then how can we use that as a distribution platform for AEC to remove some of those barriers that I've seen over the years where it's, hey, install this, do this, log into this to do that. Whereas now it's just, hey, click on this link.
How do we walk that line of, building trust that, man, like I can actually do all this tracking that used to take me a bunch of time to do, and provide those measurements, but I have to give up a certain level of, privacy or whatever.
With all this data that's being collected, and sometimes you don't even know it's being collected. I think with the integration of a lot of these, I don't want to call them virtual assistants because that's like, hey, Alexa, turn on the lights, but really more along the lines of these AI-driven interactions that I think a lot of that...
So, hey, you started this RFI, it's been 10 days, like why haven't you done something about it?
Right, and so the accountability is going to come from an automated smart system that's going to prompt all the stakeholders involved, right? So not just you, but it's going to say, hey, we've detected that you have not sent an email with the follow-up on this. So even though you're sitting on it, there's this chatter from the other people that
it's been assigned to you. You haven't responded in 3 days, please,
And not just up that to you, but then be smart enough to look at the other stakeholders who are involved in that part of the process to update them and say, hey, there is this delay, and yes, da-da-da hasn't contacted you, but it's because they're still waiting for X.
And if you're going to be writing bonds on the performance of construction contracts, having people tell us how the contracts are performing, independent, can really help us, number one, provide more capacity to the contractors who are performing well, but also as a surety, help those contractors that might be struggling to prevent or maybe mitigate a default and really make the surety product a really valuable product instead of being something that you call when the job's in trouble and it's already lawyered up.
Whenever I do a KPI or metrics or anything like that, the 3 indicators I start with is how does this relate to quality, safety, or profitability? If it doesn't relate or tie to one of those 3 things, nobody cares.
I never heard, tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I act. The saying you always...
Tell me how I measure and I'll tell you how I behave.
Yeah.
The other one was what gets measured gets managed. The classic business one.
Yeah, but this one's personal.
This is Eli Goldratt.
Yeah.
Theory of constraints is his whole thing.
The unions have a huge opportunity here to really take the forefront and be in the lead of saying, we're putting a line in the sand to say this is what makes our members valuable to your project.
It's our duty to make sure that our customer, the MCA contractor, has a quality product. And you almost hate to call a person a product, but that really is what we're doing. We're creating a workforce, a trained, skilled workforce to help our industry partner contractors, be profitable, be productive, and obviously then we get more work.
But these classes are absolutely open to our members. We have about 7,000 members that go to work every day in Chicago, and these classes are available for post-secondary or post-education, higher education, or continued learning, if you will.
It's really putting them in a position to kind of raise the bar across the board. And it all comes back to they know how to measure their member value and if those members are getting what they signed up for.
I started my first 2 years as an apprentice non-union. The biggest difference is the access to education, right, and the access to the skilled labor. So I personally, what I experienced going through non-union apprenticeship program was, like, we had classes at an empty high school in a shop, and then later on in a junior college empty classroom. There was not a lot of hands-on, we didn't have a lot of resources for training. And in the UA, we have a tremendous amount of resources for training, a lot of hands-on activities. I mean, you heard Mike talk. They have 7,000 members. I mean, Mike, how many instructors do you have on your payroll?
24 full-time instructors.
Right, that's a lot. We had one instructor who was a part-time handyman. I mean, it was, that's not true for everywhere in the country. That's my experience in Northern California.
I think there's a big misconception is the contractors are forced to be union. They're not forced to be union. They chose to be union for a reason. And I'm going to say, of course, right, I'm on the training side, I'm going to say it's because of our training.
Dan was talking about quality and safety, and if you don't have a criteria of how you're going to measure for multiple factors, then it's going to impact behavior because no one's going to take the time to lead to it.
Yeah.
You're not going to lead people saying, we have a baseline we need to keep here. And it's making sure that the criteria is really well outlined so that you know what you're measuring against, so that your teams can be set up and your team members and your leaders can be set up to succeed by having something to measure them against.
Yeah. Well, and this makes me think of that Deloitte article on the new rules of the digital age and the 4 different tipping points. It starts with the technology first that tips, and then the individual, and then the business. Because we're talking right now about that return on investment. You've got the business model, everything seems to make sense. There's still that last one of public policy that when you are the union, many times they can be the slowest ones to change as far as their policies. And Josh Bone always likes to talk about back in the day when the UA was afraid of this new technology called welding, and now it's like they're bread and butter of what they do.
And I feel like they talk about what we measure, and that it directly impacts behavior. Well, then maybe there's a little more work that has to go into why are we measuring this? What is the impact on the business? And then how do we translate this to the impact of the individual doing the work?
Yep.
Well, and that's what's so hard about it, right? Because the WIFM, what's in it for me is different for each of these different stakeholders, whether it's inside your company as a corporate, dashboard, what do I want to see across all my projects versus, a project manager and what do they need as far as efficiency, and to see sort of that dashboard view at the project level. That's probably going to be very different than what the enterprise needs. And, going through that process of defining that is, a huge, step that I think we're so focused on it just being done, and we don't realize that we actually need to kind of stop and be a part of that process and help create that communication.
How do you know what matters to measure?
It's really interesting because we do have a gamut of different kind of customers. We have subcontractors, we have GCs, we have owners, we have, single-use operators, things like that. And they all want to use StructionSite in their different ways for their different reasons. So in most cases, it's GCs that want to do their basic documentation and see progress as it goes during a job and have a nice handover deliverable at the end. The owners looking for progress. They want to see what's going on when they're hitting their milestones.
It is hand-in-hand profitability, quality, and safety that to win work, you have to be a safe contractor. As much as you don't want to be that scumball subcontractor, there is a side that, you want to be safe because you care about the people. You want to do that. But there's also a side that you need to just be safe because you can't win work if you're not safe.
The UA is it's all about measurement of hours, right? But not necessarily production, because you say the word piecework, and that's a very dirty word. But some of this does come down to, can we measure piecework in a way that isn't incentivizing the wrong things?
Because we can get so caught up in the process being wrong and old rules being wrong, but where I get really excited about, how UA is evolving, how not only is the training evolving, but the requirements for the training evolving.
And that's what we're doing. We're training our members to have those intelligent conversations with architects and engineers on the job site. So our contractors are spending tons of money developing these models, developing new technology, ways to improve their process, and we're on the job, and things happen or problems happen, and there's a communication breakdown among the trades and the AEC. So we're training our members to be able to have those intelligent conversations and say, hey, we need to go in the Navisworks model together and modify this, or let's go into the Revit model together and do this. Or we have our members that understand how these things are being built, how these models are being delivered, and they can speak to it and articulate on it the way to foster better communication, resulting in better productivity.
The guys know what they're doing. It's how do we measure what they're doing so that we can learn from it and improve everybody else.
We're used to checklists in the old world, and so how are we translating those checklists into something a little more dynamic and transferable digitally, still enabling people to have the ease of access of entering that information and really filling out that checklist, but doing it in a way that, again, impacts the behavior so everyone has access to understand what they're being measured against.
To totally follow the buzzword of the time, but it is a point. It's like with machine learning, I think that maybe you won't have to ask for that information anymore, right? There will be systems that will be smart enough to be able to take the data that you need and provide that. So the onus isn't so much on the people who are using the software, providing the data. They're just doing what they normally do. And then there are systems that are smart enough to say, here's the data I need to take from this to share these different things, right? So I think in one way, as the systems become smarter, ideally you would want them to take the burden off of the people that they're servicing.
Let's dive into what are you willing to share externally, and what is your motivation to share it?
The whole safety conversation about all this, it's where it changed, because that's how it was back in the day. Oh, somebody died on our project. Well, people die all the time on projects. That's okay. We'll just make sure the next person doesn't die, because that's how the industry was for years and years and years. And the real shift was owners. Owners would not accept unsafe subcontractors. Then OSHA started tracking. OSHA started trending the data. Everybody now has their rankings.
So here's a question for you, Dan. In this perfect world, on let's say it's a JV project or any project where we're sharing data through one of these theoretical CDXs, what's Walsh's comfort and transparency of if it's anonymized or something, sharing those root causes or sharing those for sort of the sake of industry baseline metrics? Is that something that in the future you'd see them being open to?
The politically correct answer is whenever we work on a JV, we are a one family, because Walsh is a family organization. We are willing to share and collaborate to the best ability for both parties to make our projects profitable, safe, and quality at the end of the day. Are we going to open up the doors and say, here's everything? No. If you ask, we'll share it with you, but it's we're not really going to share it till you ask. It's that weird thing. We are more than happy to kind of go down this route, because I scratch your back, you're going to scratch my back. But we're not just going to, hand over our secret recipes and be like, here you go. Thank you.
And when can sharing data more transparently be looked at as a competitive advantage?
These industries are going through such a disruption that a lot of the contractors, particularly the older ones, are saying, hey, you never had this information before, and there's a resistance. But the next generation is saying, why aren't you using my information? And so we're in this sort of middle zone right now, and a lot of people look at me like I'm crazy, because I'm looking for information that hasn't been used before.
Well, and where StructionSite is moving with our product, we're going towards this product called Smart Track, and that's going to be able to track progression on jobs being completed. So with subcontractors, drywall being completed, framing, so much data from just one picture that could happen. It's going to be tracking by taking the photos that we use for our product every single day and calculating using machine learning how much has been completed to then move that information forward.
And people have privacy issues and all the rest. My deal isn't privacy. It's show me how good I can make you look.
Oh, you mean Assuri's actually there to help you?
Not traditionally. No, not traditionally, because we've never been in a role to.
And Sasha, weren't we just talking about how it's maybe not ironic, but interesting that the union contractors are actually more transparent with each other than non-unions are in general. They kind of are more secretive and keep to themselves. And that was sort of an interesting finding.
Yeah, well, the system is set up for it, right? They're set up to be networked across the country and for them to look at how they're delivering value on projects and how they're measuring value to their members.
I've been honored to travel the country with the UA as part of their technology team and visit a lot of training centers. And I'll tell you what, there's some amazing facilities out there that our brothers and sisters really proud of what they have. And a lot of what we've done is because of mentors like Stephan and Ken Schneider and some of the other members of our UA tech team that have really helped us out in Chicago and take our program to where it is today. So we have brothers and sisters who are working all day in the beautiful Chicago weather right now. It's definitely it's a long day for them, and they come into our BIM labs after 10 hours of work at nighttime, unpaid, to continue their education. And they come in there aggressive and energetic to learn. And that's what drives me, you know.
I think they're already set up to measure success in different ways and in a more holistic way. That's their bargaining chip, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the decide portion. How do you know if you're on track or if you've arrived? And what are those specific milestones?
Nobody cares how many clashes you have on a project. People care how many clashes saved you money, how many clashes made you safer, how many clashes kind of limited rework. You know, it's not just we had 5,000 clashes.
This is so timely because I've had to speak to the continuing education modules that we create on quality and safety. And to be really frank, I didn't really understand a lot about quality and safety before coming on board with Procore until I went through training and then started looking at the content being created and started having conversations with people about quality and how much that is still so difficult to measure and difficult to track.
I had a safety manager lead one of the best orientations I ever sat in. And he went through the general, ladders are dangerous, be careful on ladders. But he talked about the economic impact of being unsafe to the guys. He sat down and basically looked at them and, discussed what workers' comp is, how that works. He went into the whole aspect of, here's what happens when you're safe and the guy next to you isn't safe and you say nothing about it. And when he talked about that, I was just kind of like, that had my attention. It had everyone else's attention in the room.
Safety and your pocketbook. It's how are we measuring the impact of some of these issues, and the impact of the business can be directly correlated to the impact of the worker and the individual. So if we're measuring them in those terms, we should be able to draw a pretty clear correlation between the two. But I think what you're speaking to is somebody who truly understands psychology and understands how do you motivate somebody to do something that they may or may not really care about. You let them know how it impacts them personally.
That one's such a no-brainer because it's both of those and the financial too, because your insurance is directly related to your safety modifier. And that's a lot of what we talked with Dixon about when we were at AEC Next was, the fact that from this very granular data tracking that you can do with, a StructionSite down at the field level, all the way up to a surety that wants to see that much more granular data that will give lower rates. You have to start calculating that into your holistic ROI calculation to start making this more expensive technology, pan out. And that's a lot of what's in the RFI report is like helping electrical contractors. And I'm sure a GC could read that too and interpret the same way of how do you really calculate and convince not just within your own company, but those other stakeholders that benefit and what is their share that they should be paying of this total cost to get the technology paid for and reap the holistic benefits of it.
Okay, Nathan, so I heard a TLA, and this one I've actually heard before, OKR, or objective and key result. How does this differ specifically from KPIs or even an ROI?
Well, yeah. So KPI, key performance indicator, versus we all know and love ROI, return on investment, right? But the OKR is a new, interesting one that really I think, Sasha, you were talking about earlier about how it's set even higher than necessarily the measurements of how you're getting there. It's really that definition of what does success look like, and do we really have that defined before we figure out the measurements of how we get there, the KPIs. And then ultimately the results of getting there, which would be the ROI.
And this again goes to that short-term, long-term vision. So much of what we do in regards to technology, at least up to this point, has seemed like sprinting. We're sprinting towards a digital reality that we want to achieve. But what we're experiencing is this is actually a marathon. And before the gunshot went off, we need to ask ourselves, did we understand what key objective? What was the objective we were trying to reach in even beginning with technology?
Yeah. Are we running a marathon or running a 10K? Because
yes.
If you told me I was running a 10K and all of a sudden I'm running a marathon, my expectations are going to be a little bit off. My measurement, my training probably wasn't quite prepared.
Yeah. Your team, the support teams along the way, the milestones where you expect to reach along the way, all of that is really driven by clearly understanding what is our objective in taking this action and implementing this technology. And more importantly, how do we measure ourselves that we're on track?
What are you measuring to prove that Procore is great? Oh, well, my account manager did the ROI assessment with me. So, okay, that's all hunky-dory. That's great. An ROI assessment for me personally, I might be jaded, means nothing. Because if I'm using technology, it's a sunken cost. So what are the true metrics that I am tracking that this tool is good for me?
Whether it be OKR, KPI, or ROI, what are the measurements at the business, project, or even individual level that will align us to our shared common definition of success?
You know, we've seen where back in the day, we were not pre-qualified to bid on projects because we didn't do X, Y, and Z technology. So we adopted that, understood it, and now it's part of our business processes. And you're starting to see that creep in more and more, from simple things of wanting LiDAR to visualizations to fun animations of the projects and 4D scheduling. So you're really starting to see it slowly come in.
Once your measurements for success are defined, how do you use that criteria to select the right technology and get you to your goal?
We aggressively go toward those vendors that we've partnered with, those industry leaders, and that's what Ken does. So, and I look at Ken as we lean on him for technology in our training center to make things happen, if you will. He's the guy that makes things happen. So we teach Revit for free to our members because Ken has created a phenomenal partnership with Autodesk to allow that. We teach Bluebeam for free to our members because Ken has reached out to Bluebeam. He's shown them the value proposition of what the UA is doing, and they said, we want to be a part of that. Ken's aggressively looking for the companies that believe in union labor, that believe in our training model. They want to partner with us. We want to partner with them. And that's what Ken's doing. He's fostering those relationships.
It has to be something that is thoughtfully considered, and those who have the means by which to help increase digital literacy should be stepping up to the plate to make that investment in industry.
A lot of what we hear now is that our contractors want our members to be ready, when they go out to the field and utilize the technology they're investing in. So that was our play with the mobile devices in the classroom, is that by our apprentices using these mobile devices more and more and more, and using BIM 360 and some other apps, they're ready to see it in the on the job site. So we definitely do utilize it in our primary curriculum, just like Stephan does, and some of our other brothers around the country.
This past fall, we took our fifth-year apprentices, gave them iPads. We crammed technology down their throat. They were drinking from a fire hose, and they loved it. They wanted more. New energy in the school that we've never felt before in 12 years that I've been teaching there, because of technology. And why did we do it? It's because they were already using it on their job and they weren't being trained on it. They're asking for technology, but they see the value in it.
And I just did a quick 20-second video of them learning Revit And I think at this point we're over 60,000 views on that video, and it's a video of nothing. It's a video. It's almost the Seinfeld effect, where we're just showing a video, but it just proves that people are really seeing what we're doing, and they're really taking notice to it.
Because if we just treat this as something you can throw money at, or we just look at this as something you can invest in just strictly through dollars, that's not our problem right now. It's expertise. It's those who have the experience. It's those who can make a connection with an individual.
So I'm curious, like on the deliver side, like what the role of owners in all of this, because that is part of this whole tipping point. The fact that the owners are changing.
That goes back to what I was just mentioning about safety. Back in the day, nobody cared about safety, and now owners require safety metrics that if you do not meet these metrics, you cannot even qualify to bid for this project. So that was the introductory into major overhaul of the industry and safety. We're kind of on that leading cutting edge right now where people are starting to demand innovation, new technology, just simple core principles that have been around for almost a decade now as standard offerings for working with them or collaborating with owners.
When is sharing more data looked at as a competitive advantage? And I feel like that's where we're really starting to get to, is starting to see those who share will be considered to be competing on the right playing field.
California's always been a leader in this. About 15 years ago, they started publishing every progress payment on the web. And we were able to do a little dashboard, and we can track which jobs had stop notices and liens. It was the beginning of predictive analytics. Now, California's passed a law last year, AB 1223, which requires every state agency to publish on the web progress payments for transparency. So like you were saying, the surety can now look out at the ecosystem and generate information without having to ask the contractor, but he may come back to the contractor and say, hey, I see you're having trouble on that job.
So I think that's what's going to be neat also as we expand internationally, is looking at how, where's their overlap? And then how are some people solving a problem over there that may be of a different level of importance? So it's a priority 3 for us as a priority 1 for them. But wow, they just solved that. And so now our 3 is done.
So many of our discussions have been around permissions and accessibility and transparency, because the answer is always going to be it depends. There's so much volatility in what I want to or don't want to share. And I think the more technology can recognize that that is the reality that we live in and adapt around it, to me, that's where the whole biometric, accessibility conversation goes, is like, should I have access to this based on certain credentials, or depending on if this person is a surety or is my internal CFO, it's going to send different information to them, because I don't want to send certain things outside where, of course, I want to capture everything internally. I think those are some of the decisions that we're trying to have, and wondering, like, how can technology help kind of intersect, and as long as we make those decisions, actually enforce those decisions easier, because it's the enforcement that we're struggling with.
Yeah, and I think once you have that architecture, the technology will fall into place, but but it's thought-provoking to hear, the way you describe it as kind of as a cube, because that was a great visual for me, and then looking at, there are so many different types of data types coming in and out, and I think as more and more people do adopt these different software vendors, they all have their own proprietary format of how they wrap something, and so now you add these additional levels of complexity, right? Because it's not just about JPEGs or PDFs or these different markups. It's really like, how do I get to not just the data, but the data that's been, had the value add of this service that's sitting on top of that can somehow move. And I know that business models and other things make that challenging for people to truly want to open that up.
But that's the way we fix the problem, is by measuring the problem so that you get rid of it. You measure calories when you eat too much so that you eat less of them. We're trying to do the same thing with RFIs and submittals and whatever. So we measure the time, we measure whose ball and court it is, we measure which phase it was originated out of, the earlier the better, and how impactful was it? Hopefully not very impactful at all.
I think we really have started to see that it's going to take more than just selling directly to your core customer base in order for in order for you to really raise the tide for all. And you're seeing organizations like the UA and others that are looking to technology to help them provide additional training for their members. And this is, something that I'm obviously passionate about in the work that I'm doing, but this is something that is seen as definitely needing.
What is that lowest common denominator of data? The really important ones for an executive to think about is on your dashboard. How does these different tiers that we've gone through before of, informal versus formal communication versus cost impact versus ultimately that owner's approval of it. And that right there tells you so much about a submittal or an RFI.
I think for a technology company, it's become very clear in the last 5 years that it's going to take more than a direct sales team and good marketing to really raise the tide in construction for all. It's going to take showing up and having the mindset of you're investing to help lift the entire industry on behalf of your core customer base, because that's what's really changing here. This is training. This is not about investing simply from a dollar standpoint. It's about the people who can make the commitment and the organizations that support them to do that in order to redefine how we deliver success in the field, how we deliver success in a project.
If we're not educating someone at the end of our project, whether that be a subcontractor, a vendor, or an owner, onto something new or something better or a new process or innovation in the industry, we're not happy. We shouldn't just build a project and leave and accept that, because at the end of the day, we want to rely on our subcontractors and our vendors and bring them onto the next project because they're smarter. They're on the ride. They're on this train with us, moving forward to a more collaborative nature of construction.
CPC wishes to thank Kalyn, Dixon, and Damon for sharing their perspectives together with Ken, Mike, and Stephan. Special thanks to our collaboration partner hosts at AEC Next and Mechanical Contractors Association of America for hosting our interview discussions. In our final segment on the investment in innovation, we turn our focus inward to discover the causes of innovation burnout and strategies to address it. Thank you for listening to the Construction Shared Pains podcast. We look forward to joining you here next time.